Welcome to the Authentic Self Revolution. I'm Carly, your guide on this journey to genuine living and the real wealth of freedom and fulfillment. In a world that just loves to tell us who we should be, we're here to remember who we truly are. We're here for the questioners, the misfits, and anyone who's ever felt there must be more to life than following the script. Together, we'll explore what it means to revolutionize your life by living it on your terms. Each week, we'll peel back the layers of shoulds and musts and dive into the practical ways to live more authentically and uncover the beautifully simple truths at the heart of personal growth. If you're listening only and want to see my face, you can head over to my YouTube channel, Owning Authenticity, where you'll find this podcast, along with a literal treasure trove of other content aimed at uncovering who you truly are. Your authentic self is waiting, so let's dive in. In the first episode, we talked about 5 signs that your authentic self is calling to you and is ready to bust out of the seams of your life. And even when you hear the call, we don't always answer, at least not right away. And that's why today's episode is all about 5 reasons why we hide our real self. So that, I feel like, is my attempt at creating right off the bat a sense of the common humanity that keeps us all stuck. Okay, if one person resonates with this, pretty much everybody resonates with this. Okay, and for the reasons that you're going to see as we dive in, almost all of these are at play for almost every single person. And as we go, I would love to recommend that you grab your journal and a pen, or if you're walking or driving, just make a mental note to come back later if there's one that really wants a deeper explore. And as we go, be thinking about this question: when was the last time you hid your real self? That might have been a week ago, a month ago, 5 minutes ago. It doesn't matter. There's no shame in noticing when we're hiding. And if anything, like I said on the first episode, awareness is so much of the journey. So when we can see that we're hiding ourselves and then understand which of these 5 reasons is at play, we have all the information we need at that point to start pulling at the threads to unravel the block that's standing in our way. And a good dose of courage doesn't hurt anything, okay? But we'll get into that on another episode. So let's dive into number 1. First and foremost, and I think this is probably the biggest one that I personally face, that I hear my clients talking about, and that is the fear of rejection. Okay, sometimes on a more surface level version of this, it might be referred to as, what will other people think? Right? Like if you're worrying about what other people will think, take that another layer deeper, right? The honesty under the honesty is that you're afraid of being rejected. You're afraid that they're going to think that is bad and they don't want. And again, common humanity is the thread that we're going to weave through every single one of these, because, you know, society and culture itself, like its job is to create the norms and expectations that, you know, serve the people of the time the best that it can. And we're going to get more into the tribal nature of human beings and how we're basically wired to care what other people think of us. This isn't necessarily one of those situations where you can just be like, you know, F everybody and I don't give a shit what people think of me. Good luck with that. You know, like that in my book is not necessarily useful thinking, because biologically it doesn't work. So there are ways to reframe the fear of rejection. And in fact, in the very next episode, that's where we're headed. We're going to go right into strategies for dealing with this fear of rejection. But for today's episode, just know that fear of rejection, caring what other people think, this is one of the biggest blockers to authenticity that's out there for all of us. And this could range big to small as far as hiding your entire self, hiding one little aspect of yourself. Maybe you're worried that one specific person will reject you. Maybe you're worried about everyone in the small town where you live will reject you. It's big and small. There's a whole spectrum of how this fear impacts our willingness to step more forward into our authentic self. So how much does that, going back to this question of when was the last time you hid, and how much of it was because you were caring what other people think, you were worried about being rejected, just make a mental note and bring that with you into the next episode where we talk more about that one. Number 2, reason that we hide ourselves is conditioning and past experiences. And what we're really talking about here is childhood trauma, okay? And whether it's a big T trauma or a little t trauma, we don't really split that hair here on this podcast and in my world, because everything is relative. Pain is pain, all right? And a wound is a wound and it hurts. And when we have negative childhood experiences, that shapes our behavior. It shapes what we're willing to do. If you put your hand down on a hot stove and it burns your palm, you will learn to avoid doing that again in the future. We are naturally pain avoidant, and for a reason that I really want to draw out here, because it's actually really beautiful how pain avoidant we are. It's actually deeply self-loving in our biology, deeply self-protective, the way that we're wired to avoid painful experiences. And that shows that we care about ourselves on some deep underlying unconscious level. We are not willing to expose ourselves to painful stimuli over and over and over. We naturally learn to avoid that. So our conditioning, our past experiences, and one of the stories that I've told on my YouTube channel many times is the story of one of the pieces of my authentic self that I struggle to step into even to this day is to sing in front of people. And I'm inching my way towards it, and I'm not any good. I mean, I'm never going to get paid to be a singer or anything like that. That's not the goal. But even to allow myself to express joyfully through song is something that I continue to struggle with. And I can trace that right back. I didn't used to be afraid of that, but when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was practicing one of our school program recital songs in front of my grandma, and I was singing it, and I was like doing my thing, and she looks at me and she says, "Carly, that doesn't sound nice." And that was all it took to clamp down, put a permanent restriction, semi-permanent, remember I'm trying to get it off there, a restriction around my singing voice. That one tiny sentence inflicted a wound that now 30 years later, I'm still trying to undo. And so these childhood experiences are incredibly impactful. And that's why after we deal with the fear of rejection in the next episode, we're actually going to do a multi-part series on social conditioning because of the hugely impactful role that it plays. So again, how much are you able to trace your impulse to hide back to specific experiences from your childhood, and possibly maybe it wasn't just one event. Maybe it was a series of events over and over and over that sent the same message. If I had kept singing and then she told me again and again and again and again that my voice was not nice to listen to, those types of wounds are a lot to unravel. And again, all we're doing at this stage of the game is highlighting the common humanity of the impulse to hide ourselves when we've been burned in the past. Number 3 is the desire for approval and validation. And this is where, not too long ago, humans were living in literal tribes meaning that your survival depended on you being accepted by the tribe. Okay, if you were deemed unsafe, unfit to live inside the tribe, and you were outcast, the chances of you surviving without the resources of the tribe were very small. So being rejected, being outcast, being disapproved of could have meant a death sentence. And our bodies remember this. Okay, so biologically, we are wired to desire approval, to desire the validation of the people in our community. And again, that might be one other person. That might be thousands of people, especially in the online age. I mean, that could be millions of people, which is also not something that our body is necessarily familiar with, but can be a huge fear, being disapproved of. We have a natural desire for approval and validation. And that basically we as children especially, but even as adults, we intentionally, because of this survival and self-protective mechanism, we adapted our personality to please others. AKA, we moved away from the things that got us punished and we moved towards the things that got us rewarded. And this is just how a human being works. So as you think back to, the people of your youth, whether that was your parents, your church, your teachers, your grandparents, whoever it was that was there and influential in your childhood, think about, what did they punish you for? What did they reward you for? And how does that play in then to what it is that you're willing to share, what it is that you're hanging your self-worth on, and what it is that you keep hidden. And chances are you can draw a straight line back to the things that you got punished for early on in life, or ridiculed for, humiliated for, rejected for, etc. Those are the things that you keep hidden today. And again, we're going to peel back the layers of all of this as we get into the deeper episodes of this podcast. But for today, just notice how the desire for acceptance and belonging plays a part in what it is that you're willing to show and what you keep hidden. Number 4 is uncertainty and self-doubt. I mean, the fear of the unknown. All right. The fear of the unknown is probably one of the greatest fears that a human can face. And that is because our mind and body is wired for survival. And anything that is unknown is unsafe to our mind and body. Our mind and body loves being able to predict what's going to happen next. And it's in that predictability that our mind and body is able to relax and feel safe. And when we don't feel safe, we constrict, we hide, we protect, we defend. And so when we're talking about uncertainty, the unknown, right? When we think about, we've been living with this mask on for maybe our whole life, maybe decades, and we're talking about, okay, so take the mask off and be your real self. That's just a giant pile of the unknown, right? I don't know what it's going to be like to be seen for who I really am. Are people actually going to like who I really am? Are people going to, make fun of who I really am? Again, we're back at, what are people going to think? It's useless in my book, in my opinion, and not everybody needs to agree with this, but it is not worthwhile effort to just forget about what other people think of you, because it is woven into every ounce of why we keep ourselves hidden. And so we're not going to try to chop off the part of us that cares about those things. We're going to heal that part. We're going to give that part some tools and some strategies about how to actually reframe these fears, how to work with them in digestible ways. So that's all coming on future episodes. But for today, just think about how often, in that unknown, in that self-doubt, how often you're afraid of making a mistake or getting it wrong. And just that general lack of not trusting yourself, right? Like the proverbial cat that always lands on its feet. Our mind and body especially when you get out of the conscious mind and get down into the subconscious mind and the body, there is so much intelligence woven into the design of what this vessel is capable of. And we also always land on our feet, okay? But when we have the time to think ahead about, am I going to do this thing? Am I going to be more authentic? Am I going to really allow myself to speak my truth? When we have time to look at it from that distance, we start trying to predict. We can't, because we've never done it before. It's unsafe. We retreat to our comfort zone. Okay? And this is, again, this is common humanity. This is how a human works. So if you find that, you have this thought a lot of like, I don't know enough yet. It's like the classic, like, let me lose 30 pounds and then I'll go to the gym. That's essentially what this part of our wiring wants us to do with our authenticity journey. Like, get really comfortable being authentic and then I'll be authentic. And it's like, you can read a book about learning to ride a bike, but learning to ride a bike means sitting on a bike and putting your feet on the pedals, putting your hands on the handlebars and pedaling and wobbling and maybe falling over, getting back up, getting back on the bike and trying it again and practicing. And then you've got your rhythm and then you've got your balance. And that's when you're good at riding a bike. And authenticity is no different. And so again, we're going to get more into how to approach it in a way where we can be with our fears of getting it wrong and making a mistake, but move forward anyway. So the later episodes will have strategies to do that. For today, just notice, how much does that play a part in your current hiding of your real self? And last but not least, number 5 is protection from vulnerability. All right. And vulnerability in culture can sometimes be a synonym to weakness or softness or sensitivity, and that we want to protect that. All right. It goes back to that deep biological wiring for self-protection and how when something has hurt us in the past, we are not willing to just charge right back into that situation, and that possibly that's even a good thing. All right. Like if you eat something that's poisonous and it almost kills you, don't eat it again. Makes sense. All right. And so this is where we're going to talk about safety a lot on this podcast, and how when our vulnerability is exposed and our soft spot is exposed and someone hurts us, someone hits us right where it hurts, chances are it's probably wise that you don't repeat that behavior with that person. Okay? The wound was not because you exposed your soft spot, it was because you exposed it in a space that was not safe. Those are two very different things. And the trick is that our body learned, don't expose the soft spot. Period. End of story. And so what we want to do with this one is to re-educate our body, our nervous system, our mind, our spirit, that there are safe places in the world. All right. And not everywhere is a safe place. And that's just the nature of this earth school that we're all living in. But we can find a safe space. We can incrementally open up our soft spot. We can incrementally allow ourselves to be emotionally exposed and allow the safe space to come in like a soothing balm of acceptance and validation, even in that vulnerability. Potentially even having that vulnerability celebrated, right? And so this is where, one of the ways that we'll come back to a lot as far as a practical exercise, the only way to learn to be authentic is to get on the bike and ride it. All right. So an authenticity accountability partner, a community that's a safe place, somewhere that you can show up and practice being authentic, that you can practice speaking about your emotions and your weaknesses, quote unquote, big air quotes around the word weaknesses, because I personally don't buy into that, but a lot of people do. where we can speak about our wounding, where we can speak about the mistakes we made. And again, I use air quotes because I don't personally believe in the concept of mistakes. I think they're happy accidents, they're opportunities for growth and learning, et cetera, et cetera. It's these kinds of reframes that allow us to be with these situations, these vulnerable situations, in a way where we don't automatically just close the door, just lock it down and protect ourselves for all of eternity. Because, it is a risk to expose ourselves emotionally and to allow people to see into our soft, tender hearts. It's also a risk not to, right? Like, if you will only ever protect yourself from harm, you also are protecting yourself from love. Like, if you don't show who you really are, nobody's ever going to love that person. And that's why relationships end up being hollow, because we show them our mask, they love our mask, and then it inevitably leads to a point where we don't feel like they actually love us. And how could they, when all we're doing is protecting and showing them our exterior? We got to open the door and let them see inside if we want that version of us to actually be loved. And all of this to say, I empathize with the common humanity of why we hide ourselves. It's natural, it's biological even. And so when we start stepping forward onto a greater level of authenticity, these are the blocks, these are the internal resistance that we can expect to encounter. And you remember on the first episode how I talked about, spoiler alert, we're always living as some partially authentic version of ourselves. Like, we don't really ever reach the destination of authenticity. We're always on the journey of a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And every single time we step forward into a little bit more authenticity, these 5 things will flare. These wounds will become aggravated, and we will heal another layer of this same wound that we've already healed. This layer, this layer, this layer, this layer, that lets us be a little bit more authentic, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And now we're going to be a little bit more authentic, which means we're going to heal another layer of these wounds. And so that's why we'll also get into some episodes in the future around why authenticity is like a spiral. Right? Like, we will expand and then we'll contract. We'll expand and we'll contract. It feels like we're revisiting the same wounds over and over and over again. And in a way we kind of are, but it's the proverbial spiral up the mountain of like, yes, you are looking over this same valley, but you've made a lap around the mountain and you're standing at a higher place on the mountain looking down at that valley. And the next time you loop around the mountain, you're going to come back to that same side and you're going to look at that thing again, but you're going to be higher on the mountain. You're going to have new awareness. You're going to have new skills, new tools, new capacity for being with that wound that you didn't have before. So we're going to talk a lot more about how to be with that contraction, right? Authenticity can often feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's because of these wounds. Right? So learning to dance with these wounds, learning to be with the pain of why we hide ourselves is ultimately the medicine that lets us unlock greater and greater and greater levels of authenticity. So let me recap the 5 things. And again, be asking yourselves, when was the last time you hid your true self? However long ago that was, however often it is, no judgment whatsoever, no shame whatsoever. But which of these reasons is playing a role? Is it a combination pack of all of them? Totally could be. Number 1 was the fear of rejection. Number 2, conditioning and past experiences. Number 3, our desire for approval and validation. Number 4, uncertainty, the unknown, and self-doubt. Number 5, protection from vulnerability. So each of these has a role to play in trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you alive and survive. And that's the thing, like self-protection will keep you alive and you can stay in survival mode and you can stay safe. But in order to live as your most authentic self and really thrive in the way that is possible for you, means to confront and unravel some of these fears, to heal some of these wounds a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And that's what this podcast is hoping to accomplish, is to lay out the stepping stones and walk us like a treasure map straight into the heart of our most authentic self. Okay, so I would love to hear either on social media, reply to my email, schedule the authenticity activation session and tell me about it on a Zoom call. You know, what is going on in your authenticity journey, and how do you find that you're hiding, right? What is playing a part? And once we see that we're hiding, once we see the reason why, we have all the information we need to put the puzzle together as far as how to move forward into more authenticity, aka into more thriving, aka into the real wealth of freedom and fulfillment. That is the ultimate goal of this podcast. So if you want to share your reflections, I would love for you to tag me on social media, #AuthenticSelfRevolution. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, follow the podcast, leave a comment, like the video, all those fun things that let other people find this content and walk themselves into the heart of their own authenticity. And if you're interested in the authenticity activation session, that is an open invitation. You can visit my website, owningauthenticity.com/activate, to schedule your session. That is totally no strings attached, for us to get to have a conversation about what is it that you truly want, unraveling the stories that are keeping you stuck, aka hiding away from what it is that you really want, and what a next step might look like as far as how to own your gifts more fully. So if you're ready to dive in more fully, that is an awesome next step to take advantage of. It has 100% been my pleasure to be with you on this episode. If you haven't caught up on the first one yet, be sure to go back and do that. 5 signs that your authentic self is calling to be seen. And on the next episode, up next, we are going to work with 3 different strategies for overcoming the fear of rejection, overcoming the fear of what will other people think, right? Getting really down into some practical strategies to overcome that and live more authentically in your life today, right? Baby step by baby step, walking yourself there. Until next time, dear soul, I do hope that you're taking such good care of who you really are. That person absolutely is needed on this planet and deserves to be seen, heard, and celebrated. Take good care, and so will I.